So let's look for a few minutes at the data protection principles that we'll be applying under GDPR. I'm aiming to stay away from drilling down in huge detail at the moment. There's too much of that about. Everywhere you turn on GDPR, people are shouting about, this is vital and that's important and you need my special shiny thing in order to get this right. Which isn't very useful when you just want to know how to make this work in your business for your customers and prospects without breaking the bank. And it's doubly not very useful when the version of the GDPR rules that will apply in UK law has still not yet been finalised. It's still going through Parliament and probably won't be finished until the new year. But one thing we do already know is what are the data protection principles that are going to apply with GDPR. So let's look at those now. Principles are useful because they lead to a thinking process, and the results of your thinking will be appropriate action. You want a data protection solution that fits your business and what you do. And that's what we'll help you design if you join one of our Coffee Klatch GDPR groups. The data protection principles will help you work out how to think about the information you're collecting or holding or using. And the foundation of all this is the GDPR's intention that the customer or the individual or the prospect should be protected from improper use of information about them. If you put on your protect the customer hat, a lot of this will fall naturally into place anyway. And if you're not sure, don't forget that you are a customer too. How would you like information about you to be treated and used? So the first principle is lawful processing. There are lots of subplots to this, but the two basic choices for lawful processing are either the individual consented to their information being used this way, or it's necessary to use the information for a good reason. And that's it, really. There are lots of other bits, but in a nutshell, it's either consent or it's necessary to use the information. Now, in Annabelle's story, she hadn't consented, and it wasn't necessary to have or use the information. But still, they sent her a follow-up sales email. I mean, they really got it wrong there. The second principle is about purpose. Why are you using this data? And you've got to be clear about that too. It's a specified purpose, not just in your head. You've got to write it down as well. Now, in the nail bar, they actually lied about the purpose. They said that they wanted the information to protect Annabelle, but actually it was to protect them. So, back to the principles, your purpose for each bit of data or each type of data that you're collecting must be specified, explicit, and legitimate. And specified means you have to tell people in advance what it is and why you're collecting it. Explicit means you've got to be clear and honest about why you're using the data. And legitimate means it must be for a fair reason. So to be compliant with this principle, we're going to have to create or update our privacy policies. And when we've done that properly, we'll be transparent to the outside world about what our purpose is for collecting data. But the big highlight point here is you can't just nick someone else's privacy policy. You've got to design your own because it's going to be specific to what you do and what you need in your business. So in the Coffee Klatch groups, we'll be helping each other to get our thinking straight so our policies really work, each for our own businesses. Now, the third principle is that data must be relevant and limited. That's relevant to the purpose and limited to what you actually need for that purpose. So in the nail bar, they were so getting this one all wrong too. But when you think about your customer data from this point of principle, it's easy to decide whether you may be going too far with what you're asking for or keeping. But don't forget, you won't be holding data for just one purpose. So what's relevant will depend on which purpose you're thinking about. And getting that thinking clear is yet another thing we'll be doing in the groups, so that each member can get things right for their own business and feel confident they have GDPR nailed by the time it comes into force in May 2018. Principle 4 is that your information must be accurate and up to date. Now, it's obvious good business sense. There's no point in having dud data on your system. It'll do you no good, and it may even cost you money and time. So we all need to have a process for checking our data and correcting or deleting inaccurate information. But the nail bar story raised another good point indirectly, which is that your data will likely be up to date if you collect it when you need it and not before. If you're collecting data on a just-in-case basis, it was the allergy testing for eyebrow tinting in Annabelle's nail bar visit. So if it's just in case we want it in the future, it may well be out of date and inaccurate by the time you come to use it. And things could then go sadly wrong, because it'll be wrong. The principle 5 is keep your data no longer than you need it. Now, by now, it won't be a shock to your system to know this is no longer than is necessary for the purposes for which the data is processed. So it's how long do you need it for the purpose that you said you were processing it for. The answer to getting this one right is to have a data retention policy. So you're planning in advance how long you should keep your data, and you're telling people in advance that this is what you're going to do. Remember, one of the things about lawful processing is that it's transparent. That is, you're telling people in advance what's going on. And principle 6 is about security. You've got to process data so it's kept secure. And this means you have to get the techie stuff right, with encryption and security walls and so on. But you also have to get the people side right too. Your organization and its people has to be set up to be respectful of data and how it's used. The nail bar example of files in an unlocked filing cabinet, which in practice is accessible to any visitor, is pretty obviously wrong. But there are online or in the cloud versions of data storage that are pretty close to being equally insecure. You really do have to check this stuff. And if it was your data, you would want whoever was holding it to be keeping it securely and to be doing regular checks to make sure. So, it's the same story. Do it the way you would want it done for your data. Now, these last 2 points are not technically principles, but they're really important underpinnings to the principles. And the first is about security of data held abroad. With lots of software programs being US based, there's also a lot of data that's being held in the States too. And there are checks that you have to do to make sure the security is okay. Anything outside the EEA, that's the EU and Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway, if it's being held outside those territories, there are checks you have to go through. Not complicated, but you just need to go through the process. The second point is a biggie, accountability. As data controller, you are responsible for and must be able to demonstrate your compliance with the data principles. This means you should be keeping records and you're showing that you've thought through things in advance. And if you do that, you're going to find you don't have a great deal of trouble. And when you think about it, this is no more than you'd want for how your own data should be handled. And if you want it, your customers and your prospects want it too. It's called respect, and it's called creating a better customer experience. Now that we've got our thinking hats firmly on and some of the principles reasonably in our minds, let's take some questions. Do type your queries into the chat room, and we'll love to be answering them.